have the time and take a stroll in your mind. In August of '64, a Tonkin Gulf incident ignites a war. Admiral Morrison gets attacked, then America strikes back. Weird scenes inside the canyon. Weird scenes inside the canyon. Military kids depart the hill, and into the canyon they will fill. They protest people who kill, but are they any different still? Weird scenes inside the canyon. Weird scenes inside the canyon.
Welcome to my summary review of Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. This episode covers Chapter 5, Desirable People. If you haven't seen episodes 1 and 2, I'll leave a link in a pinned comment. Chapter 5, Desirable People, the Canyon's Peculiar Past.
Charles R. Chuck Heath was born in March of 1938. The family lived on Farmdale Avenue, near the base of Laurel Canyon, close to where Studio City is located today.
Jeffrey Dunn, writing in The Lies of Sarah Palin. Chuck Heath is Sarah Palin's father. Palin was McCain's vice presidential pick in their failed run for the 2008 presidency. Until around 1913, Laurel Canyon was a pristine wilderness area rich in native flora and fauna. That all began to change when Charles Spencer Mann and his partners began buying up land along what would become Laurel Canyon Boulevard, as well as on Lookout Mountain. A narrow road leading up to the crest of Lookout Mountain was carved out, and upon that crest was constructed a lavish 70-room inn with sweeping views of the city below and the Pacific Ocean beyond. The Lookout Inn featured a large ballroom, riding stables, tennis courts, and a golf course, among other amenities. But the inn, alas, would only stand for a decade. In 1923, it burned down, as tends to happen rather frequently in Laurel Canyon. Matter of fact, there was just recently a fire in Laurel Canyon that killed a Rothschild in their mansion that burnt to the ground. In 1913, Mann began operating what was billed as the nation's first trackless trolley to ferry tourists and prospective buyers from Sunset Boulevard up to what would become the corner of Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Lookout Mountain Avenue. Around that same time, he built a massive tavern roadhouse on that very same corner. Dubbed the Laurel Tavern, the structure boasted a 2,000-plus square foot formal dining room, guest rooms, and a bowling alley on the basement level. The Laurel Tavern would later be acquired by Tom Mix, after which it would be affectionately known as the Log Cabin. Shortly after the log cabin was built, a wealthy guy built an imposing castle-like mansion across the road at the corner of Laurel Canyon Boulevard and what would become Willow Glen Road. The home featured rather creepy towers and parapets, and the foundation is said to have been riddled with secret passageways, tunnels, and hidden chambers. Across the street is also said that the log cabin had odd caves and tunnels. According to various accounts, one secret tunnel running under what is now Laurel Canyon Boulevard connected the log cabin, or its guest house, to the Houdini estate. With these two rather unusual structures anchoring an otherwise undeveloped canyon, and the Lookout Mountain Inn sitting atop uninhabited Lookout Mountain, Mann set about marketing the canyon as a vacation and leisure destination. He carved out subdivisions like Bungalow Land and Wonderland Park to present as the ideal location to build vacation homes. But these new parcels of land for sale definitely weren't for everyone. The Roadhouse was essentially a country club, described as a masculine retreat for wealthy men. And Bungalow Land was openly advertised as a high-class restricted park for desirable people only. Desirable people, of course, tended to be wealthy people without a great deal of skin pigmentation. Restrictive covenants were attached to the new parcel deeds. These were thinly veiled attempts to limit ownership to white males of a certain class. Wealthier residents were also attracted to Laurel Canyon. With the creation of the Hollywood film industry in 1910, the canyon attracted a host of photo players, including Wally Reed, Tom Mix, Clara Bow, Richard Dix, Norman Carey, Ramon Navarro, Harry Houdini, and Bessie Love. I need to mention here that the 8 celebrities I just listed, fully half of them died under questionable circumstances, and 3 of the 4 did so on days with occult significance. While Bessie Love, Norman Carey, Richard Dix, and Clara Bow all lived long, healthy lives, Raymond Navarro, as we saw in Part 2, was ritually murdered at his home in Laurel Canyon on the eve of Halloween in 1968. On January 18, 1923, matinee idol Wallace Reed was found dead in a padded cell at the mental institution in which he had been confined. Just 31 years old, Reed's death was attributed to his morphine addiction, though it was never really clear how he got the morphine. Tom Nix died on a lonely stretch of Arizona highway in the proverbial single-car crash on October 12, 1940, which happens to be the birthday of notorious occultist Aleister Crowley. Although he wasn't speeding by most accounts, Mix was nevertheless allegedly unable to stop in time and veered off the road. It wasn't the impact that killed him, but rather a severe blow to the back of the head and neck purportedly delivered during the crash by an aluminum case he'd been carrying in the back seat. There's now a roadside marker on the spot where Mix died. If you go by and have a look, you'll see that Florence Military Reservation is just a stone's throw away. Harry Houdini died on Halloween Day, 1926, purportedly of an attack of appendicitis precipitated by a blow to the stomach. The problem with that story is that medical science now recognizes it to be an impossibility. According to the book, The Secret Life of Houdini, Houdini was likely murdered by poisoning, and there were indications that his wife, Bess, may have been poisoned as well, though she survived. Houdini's death on October 31, 1926, came exactly 8 years after the first death to occur in what would become known as the Houdini House. In 1918, not long after the home was built, a lover's quarrel arose on one of the home's balconies during a Halloween birthday party. The gay lover of the original owner's son reportedly ended up thrown to the ground below. The owner got his son off the hook, but it proved to be financially devastating for the family, and the home was apparently put up for sale. And that's when Houdini bought the place. By most accounts, he lived there from about 1919 through the early 1920s during a brief movie career in which he starred in a handful of Hollywood films. On October 31, 2006, The Secret Life of Houdini was published, challenging the conventional wisdom of Houdini's death. The book revealed for the first time that Harry Houdini was engaged in doing intelligence work for both the U.S. Secret Service and Scotland Yard. And his Traveling Escape Act, as it turns out, was pretty much a cover for those activities, in very much the same way that an actor by the name of John Wilkes Booth appears to have used his career as a traveling stage performer as a cover for intelligence operations. It's a time-honored tradition that seems to remain largely unchanged to this day. The book does compellingly document that Houdini was, in fact, an intelligence asset who used his magic act as a cover. The authors obtained collaborating documentation from Scotland Yard. They also received an endorsement from John McLaughlin, a former CIA director. That does seem to be a pretty high murder rate for 1920s actors. Statistically speaking, if you were a famous actor in the 1920s, you would have been better off playing a round of Russian roulette than living in Laurel Canyon. I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of things seem to happen on Halloween in Laurel Canyon. On Halloween 1959, the distinctive mansion on the corner of Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Willow Glen Road burned to the ground in a fire of mysterious origin. The ruins remain today undisturbed for over 50 years. And then on Halloween in 1981, the legendary log cabin on the other side of Laurel Canyon Boulevard also burned to the ground in yet another fire of mysterious origin, although some reports speculated that it was a drug lab explosion. Anyway, two ambitious projects in the 1940s brought significant changes to Laurel Canyon. First, Laurel Canyon Boulevard was extended into the San Fernando Valley, providing access to the canyon from both the north and the south. That project increased the traffic in the valley, which probably worked out really well for the planners of the other project, which meant that the increased traffic from this project wasn't noticed. And that's good because the other project was a secret one. What would become known as Lookout Mountain Laboratory was originally envisioned as a fortified air defense center. Built in 1941 and nestled between 2.5 secluded acres off what is now Wonderland Park Avenue, the installation was hidden from view and surrounded by an electrified fence. By 1947, the facility featured a fully operational movie studio. And I'll just put it this way, that it was quite big, as he describes in the book. Over its lifetime, the studio produced some 19,000 classified motion pictures. That's more than all of Hollywood studios combined. Officially, the facility was run by the U.S. Air Force and did nothing more nefarious than process AEC footage of atomic and nuclear bomb tests. The studio, however, was clearly equipped to do far more than just process film. The laboratory had an advanced research and development department that was on the cutting edge of new film technologies such as 3D and other things. And Hollywood luminaries like John Ford, Jimmy Stewart, Howard Hawks, Ronald Reagan, Bing Crosby, Walt Disney, Hedda Hopper, and Marilyn Monroe were given clearance to work at the facility on undisclosed projects. Accounts vary as to when the facility ceased operations. Some claim it was in 1969, while others say the facility remained in operation longer. The existence of the facility remained unknown to the general public until the early 1990s, though it had been long rumored that the CIA operated a secret movie studio somewhere in or near Hollywood. Filmmaker Peter Koran was the first to learn of its existence through classified documents he obtained while researching his 1995 documentary Trinity and Beyond. That was the atomic bomb movie, and I remember seeing a commercial for it on TV, and I ordered it as a VHS tape. Really good movie if you haven't seen it. It's narrated by William Shatner. I think we can all agree there's nothing a little suspicious about a covert military facility operating in the epicenter of hippie culture, so let's just move on. As Barney Hoskyns had written in his book Hotel California, in the 1950s, Laurel Canyon was home to all the hippest young actors, including Marlon Brando, James Dean, James Colburn, and Dennis Hopper. It was home to Natalie Wood as well. In fact, Natalie lived in the very home that Cass Elliot would later turn into a Laurel Canyon party house. And, like the home's later occupant, Wood died young under rather mysterious circumstances, as did, to a lesser extent, Canyonite James Dean. And as it did, come to think of it, a few other people with very close ties to Canyonite Dennis Hopper. Dean, Hopper's close friend and co-star, died in a near head-on collision on September 30th, 1955 at the tender age of 24. Then there was Nick Adams, who had formerly roomed with Hopper. Like Hopper, Adams had worked alongside James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. According to Dean himself, Adams had worked alongside Dean even earlier than that, when both were young male prostitutes working the mean streets of Hollywood. Adams died on February 6, 1968, at the age of 36, in his home in Coldwater Canyon. Adams' official cause of death was listed as that thing that people do themselves that the word starts with an S. Of course, but nobody really seems to believe that. Actor Forrest Tucker has bluntly declared that, quote, all of Hollywood knows Nick Adams was knocked off. Next to fall was Sal Mineo, who we discussed in Part 2, who, like Dean and Adams, had worked with Hopper on Rebel Without a Cause and remained a friend thereafter. Like Hopper, Mineo was a regular in the Sunset Strip clubs where The Doors, Love, The Byrds, and The Mothers played. He'd been alongside Hopper and Peter Fonda during the infamous riot on the Sunset Strip in November of 1966. And, as had already been discussed, Mineo was stabbed to death in close proximity to those very same clubs on February 12, 1976. Last of all was Natalie Wood, who also appeared in Rebel Without a Cause, and who at various times dated both Dennis Hopper and Nick Adams. Wood died on November 29, 1981, in a drowning incident off Catalina Island that has never been adequately explained. At the time, she was in the company of actors Robert Wagner and Christopher Walken. Natalie was 43 when she was laid to rest. These 4 actors' deaths have been dubbed the Rebel Without a Cause curse, except for Dennis Hopper. The list of famous former residents of Laurel Canyon also includes the names W.C. Fields, Mary Oster, Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, Errol Flynn, Orson Welles, and Robert Mitchum, who was infamously arrested on marijuana charges in 1948 in Laurel Canyon. Mitchum's arrest, by the way, appears to have been a thoroughly staged affair that cemented his Hollywood bad boy image and gave his career quite a boost. Another famous resident of Laurel Canyon was science fiction writer Robert Heinlein. Heinlein was a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis, and he had served as a naval officer. After that, he embarked on a successful writing career. And despite the fact that he was, by any objective measure, a rabid right-winger, his work was warmly embraced by the flower power generation. If his biography sounds vaguely familiar, it's because it's virtually identical to the biography of L. Ron Hubbard, who you may have heard of. His best-known work was the novel Stranger in a Strange Land, which many in the Laurel Canyon scene found to be hugely influential. It has been said that that book helped provide a theoretical basis for Manson's family. David Crosby was a big Heinlein fan as well. In his autobiography, he referenced Heinlein on more than one occasion. Frank Zappa was also a member of the Robert Heinlein fan club. And that, my fearless readers, or for your case, listeners, this brings us to the Laurel Canyon era that we are primarily concerned with, the wild and woolly 1960s. But before returning to that era, what conclusions can be drawn from this brief look at early canyon history? For one, it appears that murder and random acts of violence have been a part of the culture of the canyon since the earliest days of its development. It also appears that intelligence operatives posing as entertainers have likewise been a part of the canyon since the earliest days. And you had intelligence operatives that were streaming into the canyon to work at Lookout Mountain Laboratory for at least 20 years before the first rock star set foot in the canyon. We were supposed to believe that all the musical icons who settled in Laurel Canyon in the 1960s and 70s just sort of spontaneously came together. So you're Jim Morrison, you just arrived in Laurel Canyon, and you're going to front a band that's on the verge of overtaking the company by storm. And you live down the street from a guy, Frank Zappa, whose wife you went to kindergarten with, and her dad, like your dad, was involved in atomic weapons research and testing. Although almost all of you and others hail from the Washington, D.C. area, you find yourselves on the opposite side of the country in an isolated canyon high above the city of Los Angeles, where y'all are clustered next to a secret military installation. The question that naturally arises here is, what do you suppose the odds are that all of this just came together purely by chance? I, the author, have received a fair amount of negative feedback. I was accused of inferring guilt by association and of engaging in character assassination. To some extent, these are valid complaints, and yes, it is fairly easy to gather together a few different isolated facts and use them to paint a much different portrait of these artists and pen an impassionate defense of any of them. But what I ask is that you try to stand back and take in the big picture and then ask yourself the following question. Exactly how many coincidences does it take to make a conspiracy? Jim Morrison was fond of telling interviewers that his parents were dead, and that he did so because in essence his parents were dead to him. But the picture on the intro of this video shows him and his dad on the ship Bonhomme Richard in January of 1964. Telling people that your parents are dead could be a very effective way to avoid talking about who your father really is. It was such an effective strategy that in fact it took over 4 decades for the truth to finally come out. And with that, we complete Chapter 5, Desirable People.
Weird scenes inside the canyon. Weird scenes inside the canyon.
I hope you enjoyed this summary of Chapter 5. Please comment, like, and share. That helps the channel. I'll hopefully have Part 4 out before too long. These things take a lot of time. But until then, I'll catch you on the next video.
Military kids depart the hill, and into the canyon they will fill. They protest people who kill, but are they any different still? Weird scenes inside the canyon. Weird scenes inside the canyon.